All right, welcome back to another photo class. Today, we're going to talk about the basics of Aperture. We're going to explore what it is and what it does to your images. And be sure to stick around to the end because I do have a trick that should help you remember how Aperture impacts your depth of field. So let's go ahead and get going. Let's start with what we know. We know that when we point our camera at a subject, that this lens, what it's doing is it's gathering light and then focusing that image onto the film or the sensor, depending on your camera. That lens also has inside of it a series of blades that can open and close and act as an iris. This works very much like the iris in your eye. And so as light levels increase or decrease, you can open and close this iris. The main difference, the really main difference between the iris in your eye and the iris in a camera is that your eye is acting involuntarily while a camera needs your input. Aperture is referred to in f-stops. And what that is the measurement of the opening of that iris at the back of the lens. As you would imagine, a larger opening is going to allow more light in and a smaller opening is going to allow less in. What's not really intuitive is the numbering system is backwards from that. A larger number actually means a smaller opening, and conversely, a small number means a larger opening. So that's about one of the only really tricky things to remember about selecting your aperture size is the numbering. Now, the aperture also impacts the range of your photograph that is in focus from front to back. So what you'll find is that when you have a large opening, so a low f-stop number, you're going to have what's called a shallow depth of field. The area that is focused from front to back is going to be fairly short. Where if you have a higher f-stop number, something f11 or higher 18, something like that, you will find that you'll have a much greater depth of field. So this is how, let's say, for example, a portrait photographer who wants to blur the background of an image behind their subject, they're going to use a much more open lens, something with a low f-stop range, something f1.8 or something like that. They want really narrow, or 2.4, something like that. And that'll allow the background to go out of focus and blur, or what is known as bokeh. Where a landscape photographer may want to have everything from the stone that's right in front of them to the mountain peak in the background in focus. So we're going to typically use a higher f-stop number, so a smaller opening, to have a greater range of focus. The best way for you to learn about how depth of field works is to go out and practice. You are going to hear me tell you to practice a lot in this series. But that's okay. That's what photography is. It is a practice. So take your camera, take it out, focus on a subject that has a background that's a fair distance away, and then change your f-stop settings to go through the whole range and see what areas become more and more sharp and in focus and which areas blur based on what settings you have. Just change the f-stop. Don't change anything else, just the f-stop. And then see what happens and see what it does. Okay? Now, I did tell you at the beginning that I do have a trick for you, and I do, but it's more of a mental exercise than a trick. But it should help you to remember about depth of field and aperture size. So let's go ahead and move on to that. All right, I understand that it looks like I have a cooking experiment here in front of me, but go with me here on this. I think it will help you to understand depth of field. What I have is 2 equal amounts of water. This is 1 cup in each of these here. I have put red food coloring in them so that you can so that you can see the water a little bit better. I have a glass and I have a pie dish. What we're going to do is we're going to pretend that this glass is a small aperture, a small opening, so a high f-stop number. So let's say that this is f11. And this one here, this is a large aperture. This is something like f1.8, something very, very, very wide open. So we're going to pretend that these diameters represent the opening of the iris in your camera's lens. What we're going to do, and I need to explain that this is actually not how the physics of depth of field actually works, but this has helped me to remember what's going to work the best in situations. So hopefully this visual will help you as well. So what we're going to pretend is that there is a finite amount of information in your image, in your scene, that can be in focus at any one time. And that is represented by the water. So if we have only a certain amount of information that can be in focus at any one time, what does Aperture do to impact how much of that as far as the depth? So let's put our first scene into our f11 aperture. All right, so as you can see, we now have a scene that has a pretty good depth of field. It has a good amount of information that's in focus from front to back, okay? So let's do the same thing over here in our f1.8 aperture. So as you can see, we have a much shallower depth of field here. Same amount of information, it's just now squished down. Again, not how the physics works, but to me, this is stuck in my head and has worked for me to help remember that front to back. So again, a small opening, so a high f-stop number, greater depth of field. A large opening, so a low number, a very shallow depth of field. Well, I do hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you did learn something. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comments below and I will answer them to the best of my ability. If you did find this helpful, please like it. And if you haven't already, subscribe, that'd be great. Also, I want to know what you guys think about this series here. I'm trying to do them once a month because I want to give you guys plenty of time to practice each element as we talk about them. So, but a little bit of feedback would be greatly appreciated. Let's see. Next week, I am out backpacking. I am super excited for that. I haven't had too many overnights anywhere, so I'm really looking forward to spending a night out in the woods. Watch in the following weeks for a video on that. I will be making something about that experience and getting out into the backcountry, which is I'm so looking forward to. Let's see. That's about everything right now. So I do hope that you appreciated this. I do hope that you learned something. And until then, happy shooting.